Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough where I attempt to load balance all my factories. For some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last episode, I turned all the remaining bauxite in the world into aluminum ingots. Over 10,000. I now have over 3 million coupon points per minute being generated. So at least I have that going for me. Today I'm going to be headed out to the west coast of the map and using most of the crude oil to create over 5,000 rubber per minute. There goes the train. Off to go get some more bauxite. So I'm out here, I always forget the name of this area. In between the blue crater and the good old grassy fields. Almost to the void here. The current goal is to stretch this train line and get it out into the grassy fields. From there, I'm going to create a train station and create another line that's going to end up going out to the west coast. We pull up the map here. Oh, the Christmas factory is still going. Eventually, I should probably just delete those cards. We'll just ignore those for now. Like the intro and title gave away, I'm going to be making a whole lot of rubber. So I do need a good amount of oil for that. The blue crater would be closest, and there's a good amount of oil, so I definitely could have made it there. But I decided I'm going to need a train station out here in the grassy fields anyways, and I would like another factory out here on the west coast because there's a good amount of oil and obviously just tons of water. So since I haven't built anything out here, I think this is going to be the next spot for my next major factory. There won't be nearly as many different items being made as the main factory does, but this one's going to create a couple different things in a good amount of quantity. So first, it's infrastructure. The other benefit of getting train lines all the way out there is I am finally going to be able to use a good amount of that polymer resin. Now that I've made it out this far, and I'm pretty sure this is where the track's going to go, I can lay down my supports, which with blueprints, really pretty easy. And until I get vertical nudging, I'm kind of stuck doing this because I couldn't think of another way. I guess maybe now that I have the Mark 6, I could combine both of them into one blueprint. Then it would just be a challenge kind of getting it to snap to the other ones. May have to try to play around with that. The train has now been extended. So if we zoom back out, across the void. So it ended up having a little bit of a bigger gap than I normally do, but I didn't really want one of the supports to just go straight through the void. And I still think it's fine. It's still quite a bit higher off the ground than I want, but unless you do a spiral, I could ramp down and then just ramp back up. But that just didn't seem worth it. So it's a ways off the ground here, which I don't love, but as soon as we get onto this side, we're not too high off the ground. I did want to avoid the geyser just in case I need to use it. I guess that's not a geyser. Resource well of water. And now that we are here at the grassy fields, pretty much right over here is going to be where I'm going to put the train station. That way it'll leave a huge amount of area for a big factory out here in the grassy fields, and then I can still transport to and from here pretty easily. Alright, so let's see if we can find an area to pick. So this is usually what I do. Let's just go ahead and switch to the jetpack. So this right here isn't on the world grid. And you can tell because I'm aligned with the foundations and we aren't facing west. So that right there would be on the world grid. So we're just slightly off, but I want to get the height the same so I don't have to change any of that. So I'm just dragging this out as kind of a reference because this is about the area. Maybe we'll go a little bit farther. Now I'm going to switch to vertical, and we're going to zoom up a whole bunch. And now I can kind of find just the right spot. Alright, so this is on the world grid, but not the height I want. So I'm just going to delete that one. Grab the 2. I think it's 3 meters off, so that should be... There we go, so that's the right height. Alright, so now that I have the height, let's go ahead and just zoom out a couple. And now I can delete all this. Alright, let's go ahead and grab our new 6x6 blueprint. I'm just going to throw a couple of them down. Alright, and really quickly, you can see the outline of a train station. And this is conveniently at the right height, so when I build the train line into the actual train station, it's a little bit easier this way. And I've got the start of a train station. So I think it was in the last video where we were up in the Red Forest making 10,000 aluminum ingots that I showed how I merged my train line that is off the world grid onto the train station, which is on the world grid. So I just went about it the same way. And we got the train line all merged up back onto the world grid. It has to do a little snaking back and forth, but then we got it plugged into here. I've got the 3. And then from here, I'm going to go, let's see, I think it's up 7. We need 6, right? Yep. Put those there. We can lock in another layer and add a roof to this, which is basically going to be the second floor. So I'm going to have this layer of trains are going to be the ones that head out into the west coast. This should be just high enough to go right over that terrain, whereas I think the lower level wouldn't have. Well, it would have been close. But that's alright. This layer of trains is going to go out that way. And then as far as the decorations go, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm just going to have a corner piece going up and down. And then I created this blueprint, which is real simple. Place one and I'll show you. Alright, so I'm just using the outer corner extensions, which are those fun little quarter circles. So I've got 2 of them to create a nice little rounded part, and then just a painted beam with the tiny signs that I just painted green because it's the Grassy Fields. So we'll have these just running up and down on the outside. Cover the rest of it with it also. Right there. And that'll create its own fun little pattern. Other than that, I'm going to keep it relatively simple. Probably just some basic walls and whatnot. And instead of using windows, they'll probably just be open air. Let me get to work and I'll show you what it looks like. Like I said, pretty simple. Take a look. So here is the first floor. Not too changed, just the basic walls. And the second floor, haven't put the train stations in quite yet. Well, looks like I'm going to have to dodge that obstacle, but that shouldn't be too hard. So this right here is the center. We can get rid of those 4. We can get rid of those. This is where the train is going to come out. Go ahead and lock it in place, and it looks good. I just need to build some train stations and get them connected and get this started. Thankfully, it really shouldn't be too bad getting around this. Well, I guess first what I really need to do is build the train stations and connect them to power, because the hover pack just makes this so much easier. And for that, it's pretty easy because I keep it basically the same. I give myself 2 foundations here in the front so I can move around and whatnot. This is directly in the center since I've got 3 train lines. One of them's going to go here, but we always go train station, empty platform with the catwalk. Gotta have my cool catwalks there. We'll go freight platform. Go ahead and face it this way. 8 freight platforms and 2 of the empty ones for the locomotives on this side. Alright, so there's 1. For the second one, I want it lined up same spot there, but this one, I'm gonna give myself 1 and about a half foundation. And it's gonna line up right in the middle of this. Is this facing the right way? It's not. I thought it looked weird. Alright, and we're just gonna do the same thing. This train line, nice and easy. Hopefully. Hooray! Okay, so that connects up. Now I connect it to power, and we can start building this. So now I'm just going to lay down a bunch of tracks. We're just going to swing around here and then head down, and we'll be kind of down by the beach over there. It'll be time to make another train station. I decided to change things up a little bit and start the turn a little bit sooner, just so it was easier to turn back. That way I didn't have to make it too tight. Alright, let's take a quick train ride. It's not too far. And here we are. Beaches of the West Coast. And a whole bunch of oil. Look at all this beautiful water that is about to get covered in concrete. First, I need a train station. Originally, my plan was somewhere over here, or maybe a little bit farther down on the beach, but have the train station half on the beach, half on the water, or something like that. But when I look at the map, these are actually really close together. And eventually, I know I'm going to connect a train station that's somewhere up here. So I think it would actually make a little bit more sense if I put the train station a little bit farther north, maybe somewhere over here. And that will even out the distance between the two sections by quite a bit, which isn't really a huge deal by any means. That'll make a little bit more sense once we finally get these trains built and I get the logistics going. So let me get back to building my train line. We're going to get out to basically that spot right out there. And then I'll build a similar train station to the one I just built out here in the Grassy Fields. So for the new one is going to be a little bit closer to the ground, and I'm going to use all of the space underneath it. I made it out to the islands. I give a lot of credit to the people who can build just straight on the ground or just work with the terrain much more closely than I attempt to do. I've just never been good at doing that. So for me, this is kind of like the ideal height. It shows off just enough of the supports and it's not crazy high off the ground. What is it for you guys though? Do you guys build straight on the ground? Do you just build just way over everything? Or do you kind of try to find that happy medium? I'm curious to know. But I got the train line to come all the way out here. And I just used those same tricks again, just kind of snaked around and got to plug in right into the middle of the train station here. This is going to be the bottom floor, and there should be plenty of space underneath here, even to throw a couple sinks, because that's probably what I'm going to be doing with the rubber until I have a place to send it. Gotta get some more coupon points. So next I want to decorate this a little bit, and then I need to start laying down the platform for where this huge factory is going to go. Both of those are going to use some concrete. So let's hook up a radar tower temporarily and take a look. Not too far away, there are two normal limestone nodes that are actually up pretty high up on this mountain area. I don't have any plans for these in the near time. Let's go up there and take a look. And here we are. I am surprised with how close it is to all my bauxite that I'm picking up by train over there. Didn't realize the limestone was just on the other side of this gap here. Quite the contrast in biomes, green versus red. But we've got the two limestone nodes right here, and it's not too far away, but I should have brought power up with me. I didn't. I just, good old jetpack. This rocket fuel, you can scale up cliffs real easily. I think I need one more row. I've got my concrete with dimensional depot and the sink. I never noticed that it said one more missing resource. But as you can see, I've got 27 Mercer spheres from running around in the Red Forest. I grabbed a whole bunch. And so I think using it for more concrete sounds like a good plan. I just need a Mark V belt from here to here. And then I just need to bring power up. And if you're curious about this or any of the other blueprints that I use, they're pretty much all on my Google Drive, linked somewhere down in the description. And there's a whole video dedicated to this one on a different playlist. I just need to add a second one of these and then bring up the power from down there. And we'll get it turned on. So I got a little carried away and just went ahead and built the train station. Like I said, it's pretty simple, very similar to the one in the Grassy Fields, but we'll go over that in a second. but I did want to just show. So I have the power coming out from there. Made a more permanent spot for the radar tower because it's just nice to have those around. And then using the good old power towers because they are just really great for stuff like this when you want to stretch power over really long distances, especially if you need to cover a bunch of height. They are pretty great. And so that's how I got the power all the way up here. Avoid some radiation. Can never have too many berries. Now I've got 2 of these set up, but I'm actually going to add just a little bit more, and I wanted to show you. This is the standard blueprint, but we're going to change it a little bit just because I've still got plenty of Mercer spheres. So you know what? Let's see if we can just double this up and get 4 in here. Ooh, alright, we need to use the control so we can get the half nudge in there, and I think that should be far enough back. Can we go farther? Oh, we can. Okay, so I think right there will be good. So let's get 2 of those. And then let's see. Alright, we just want to line that up and then half nudge. Since the max upload speed is 240, we can just use Mark III belts from the splitter into both the dimensional depots. So that means Mark IV in the depot into the splitters. This way I get 960 concrete per minute for as long as I have enough in this industrial storage container. The blueprint itself only makes 200 a minute, but I think this will actually work out pretty well. It's still going to take a long time to completely empty the industrial storage container. Alright, so let's just power this on and watch it come to life. I know other people have made videos and talked about it plenty, but just as a reminder, the industrial storage containers do not work like splitters. If you don't have basically 2 stacks in here, only one of these outputs is going to be used. Once you have 2 or more stacks, then both of these can basically get used. But until then, it's going to prioritize this bottom one once these fill up because they only have that internal bay of 1 stack. And then the top ones will fill up, and then the industrial storage container will start to back up. And at 200 concrete per minute, it really will only take a couple minutes. Since each dimensional depot uploads at 240 per minute, I currently have an upload speed of 3,360 for concrete. Somebody commented on one of my videos a while ago that I was going to end up having like 6 dimensional depots for concrete, and I thought they were crazy. There's no way I would actually need that much. And now I've more than doubled it. And let's put it to the test, because right now I have a lot of concrete to place. And here we have the new train station. Real similar to the one I just made in the Grassy Fields. Doesn't need to be anything too special. Just need some good transportation. So this is going to be the first level, and then I've got plenty of space down here that I'll probably pave a good portion so that I can do any of the load balancing to and from the trains. And the final sinks will be down here. That way it's really easy to just throw them on a train when I'm ready to send them to another factory when I need to use it. For right now, that'll do. And I've been busy over here, putting my new concrete to work. But thankfully with this new 6x6, being able to just throw down 36 foundations at once is just so nice. There we go. So I was able to make it a pretty good distance before I finally ran out. And now I can only place, one every like 6 or 7 seconds, but it's not so bad. I was curious about where exactly the world border was, so that's what this is. So I wanted to just kind of see where exactly it was. It got a little carried away. But yeah, it's a diagonal for quite a while, and then I'm sure it changes somewhere down there. But at least for now, I know that I shouldn't build too close to this line. It still gives a whole lot of space. I think I should be okay. Now I have a basic outline for the factory, so it's probably going to change, and I'm definitely going to clean it up. I'm not going to leave it quite like that. We'll probably make a nice diagonal line across there, and maybe the same right here, so it's not just a normal corner. Try to make the design a little bit different. But before I get too sucked into this project and start placing all the machines I need, I think I want to set up my train. Taking a look at the map, let me give you a real quick overview of what's going to happen. I'll go set it up, and then I'll give you a quick run through. Here in the red forest, I'm making all that aluminum, but to do that, I'm making a whole bunch of petroleum coke right up here, which has a byproduct of about 900 polymer resin, and that's currently being sunk at the train station. So I'm going to put that on a train. It's going to head down into the swamp, where I'm also making petroleum coke for this aluminum setup. That is only 300. So I'm going to do a little bit of load balancing, and then I'm going to have 2 freight cars of 600 head on over to the Grassy Fields, and then from the Grassy Fields, head on over here. And that's going to help both simplify a lot of this production and increase the amount of rubber I can produce. So let me get that set up. Here we are back in the red forest, where the journey begins. So we've got our train station right here. And this right here is picking up our 900 polymer resin. So if we look down below, I decided to try to get it out of the way. So a little bit different. I don't know how I feel about it, but felt like trying to make it at least a little bit supported. So I just added the small storage container because you don't really need the big one for when you're loading, because this is only going to get used for the, I think it's something like 27 seconds is the docking animation. And so that's how long the belt is paused. So that's when it'll pile up in the storage container. And then as soon as it finishes, because I'm using a Mark 6 belt, that'll be able to make up for the difference for when it's paused. And now that our train is here, we'll watch it drop off the bauxite, pick up the polymer resin, and we'll go ahead and ride the train on down to the swamp. Here we are back in the swamp. And here is our 900 resin being dropped off. And if we just follow this line, it goes through this level over to here. And this is where we do our little load balancing. So since this is 900, but it's not load balanced, so when it is coming off the train, it's getting the full 1200. That's fine, because as long as I'm spending 2/3 that way, 1/3 this way, the amounts will end up being the same. And so now we're joining up with the 300 that's coming from down below. We go all the way to the bottom floor. I just added a smart splitter, and I did the same thing to the other one. I just didn't show it, and I left the sink there because if for whatever reason I screw something up and the train isn't running fast enough and things start to get backed up, I don't want either of these aluminum factories to shut off completely. So I'm leaving the sink in here. Now the priority is sending it to the train, but if anything happens, the overflow will get caught in the sink, and that way this factory can continue to run. And so now I've essentially split this amount into 600 on this car and 600 on this car. And once this train gets here, we'll hop on and follow it on its next leg of the journey. And I finally did a little bit of decorating because my train stations were kind of bare. So I just made this a blueprint. It's just using the pillar supports, big concrete pillars painted black, and then I just added some ladders on the side to give it a little bit more texture, different contrast in color, instead of just using a beam or something. And from farther away they start to look a little bit weird, but up close I think it looks alright. The train stations definitely aren't the fanciest looking things, but they are functional. Alright, here's our train. And we're back in the grassy fields. So this is going to drop off the resin, and then it's going to go up to this one. And we're just going to go straight into from one to the other. No need to do any load balancing here. And here is the last leg of the journey. And we're finally here at the West Coast. Alright, so let's take a look at the train station. So let me talk about some of the things I've learned. I've never done transporting by trains quite like this. I've done a lot of push-pulls. I've done, a big world-spanning train track where you use signals and a lot of trains share the same tracks, right? I've never done it where there's a lot of push-pulls and they kind of offload one to the other. So this was a first for me. I thought it would be fun and interesting, and I wanted to see how well it worked. And it works. But let's talk about it. So this definitely works. I've let it run for, I think, over an hour now, and none of the train stations ever back up, and those bins never completely empty. So the transfer rate will fluctuate by a decent amount. Sometimes it'll be over 600, and a bunch of times it'll be under 600. And here's the reason why. None of these legs are going to be exactly the same distance. So the time it takes for the very first train to take 900 down into the swamp, that round trip is not the same as the swamp to the grassy fields. So because this leg is longer than this one, there's pretty much always going to be something to pick up when it does this part of the journey. When it comes back, this one is probably already completed its trip, right? Because it's shorter. But because this is so much longer than this one, every once in a while this train will do a complete loop before this one can do a complete loop. And so it's actually going to come back with nothing. And then it might show up and only half of it's unloaded because that one just dropped it off. So thankfully, because I'm using 2 freight cars to move it and they only have 600 each, I have so much wiggle room that it doesn't matter. None of the freight cars will ever be at risk of being full and not being able to pick up everything in one go. And as long as there's enough of a buffer here that can last that trip when it goes and it just doesn't bring back anything, and then sometimes it'll bring back a whole bunch more than usual, right? So as long as I have a decent enough buffer in these storage containers, it'll make up for all of that weird timing issue. So I just need a decent enough buffer, which honestly, yeah, it seems like that's already enough. But when it comes time to turn it on, I'll probably let those sit for a minute, let it build up just a little bit more, and then start it. But just in case any of you were thinking about doing a train system like this, just keep that in mind. It's much harder to be able to see. I can't rely on the numbers coming from the freight platforms. I actually have to go look at the train stations and make sure that it's not backing up. But if it's not backing up, then the train's able to transport it all and we're in business. But I want to make sure that there are no issues with that before I turn on the factory and then realize it. So we're going to let this keep running, and then I'll just go over and check those containers every once in a while and make sure that they're never completely running out. Alright, so I ran some power over here. I just threw down an oil extractor to make sure this was tall enough. And I've got plenty of space. I'm probably going to end up paving over a lot of the land portion down here, just to give myself a little bit more area to work with. This is going to be one of those factories where I do a little bit of the logistics underneath. The majority is still going to be up here because I do like to see everything moving around. But there are places where it's just easier to be able to go underneath and do a couple things. Especially if I need to use a storage container, I just kind of like keeping those out of the way. I just haven't figured out a way to build them into the systems and make them look not just completely out of place. So those will go down here. It's finally time to start the factory. So first, let's take a look at some blueprints. First step, we need to make fuel. So I've got this blueprint. We've got 2 refineries. These are ever so slightly overclocked. So we're going to take 33.75 crude oil. We're going to turn that into 45 heavy oil residue. And then we're getting 22.5 polymer resin. The heavy oil residue is just making a short trip over to a blender. And this is using the diluted fuel alternate recipe. And this is underclocked to 90%. So I only want to output 90. And I'll show you why in a second. So to make the 90 fuel, we need the 45 heavy oil residue that we have from the one refinery. And then I'll need 90 water. And so if we look underneath, this right here is going to collect all of the polymer resin. And then I've got a spot to plug in my water. So my thinking is 2 of these together would be 180, which is 1 water extractor with 1 power shard. I could group up more machines, but since the blueprint is only going to fit 2 of these, it just makes a lot more sense to just group 2 of them at a time. I could squeeze a third one in per water extractor and do 270 out of 1 and feed 3 machines, but then I have to do a whole lot of manual pipe work, and I just think this is going to be a lot easier. For the next step, I have 3 refineries. These are all going to be using the residual rubber recipe, where I'm taking 40 polymer resin, 40 water, and turning that into 20 rubber per minute. I've got 3 of them grouped together, and I'm going to load balance a whole row of these, and that's why I already have this set up, so that when 2 of these are next to each other, I can really easily just grab the splitter and do that. So the load balancing will be nice and easy. And then I haven't quite decided, but I'll group up probably a couple of these blueprints together. Since these don't need a ton of water, I'll be able to feed probably more than 1 of these blueprints per water extractor. And then I've got the output. And yes, that probably looks really funny, but eventually it will make sense. All right, so for the last blueprint. And ta-da! All right, so first step, we've got the 2 blue refineries. These are doing the recycled plastic alternate recipe, where we're taking 30 rubber, 30 fuel, you get 60 plastic. This is kind of tight, and so I'll go downstairs and show that off. And so this one is going to output straight down below. So we did the load balancing right here. So this is going to go into a splitter, and then we're going to split it in half. So half goes here, half goes here, which are these 2 refineries. So since this is outputting 60, we're going to split that in half. This one is going to get 30, and then we've got the 30 fuel, and that's going to make 60 rubber. And as many of you know, if we look at these recipes, both of them require 30 fuel. So 30 fuel, 30 fuel. So 3 of these are grouped together, and they would equal 90. And so I have a Mark 1 pump here. And before you think I'm crazy for doing this, I will show you at the end why. So it's going to be much harder to explain why I'm keeping this here now, but when we turn this on, I'll show you why. But if we look at it, it's basically 10 meters from the floor. Now I'm pretty sure for head lift purposes, it starts at basically like the middle of the output is like 0. Basically where the 10 is ending, I think, is where the machines like count the start of head lift. So I think there's a good chance I don't need these, but I'm going to keep them in there anyways. They ultimately cost very little material, 2 megawatts of power each, and when it comes to fluids, if I can just make sure that it works, it's worth an extra 100 or 2 megawatts. I don't even care. So this is where the initial rubber will get plugged into. That'll get turned into plastic, and then the plastic then gets turned into rubber, and then I'll just do the final merging by hand, which I don't mind. Getting all the rest of this belted up together just is so much easier. I did just run the power underneath and clipped it through the machine, so if you look closely, you can find the wire. It's not my favorite part of refineries. I really wish there was just a slightly better way to hide it. If this section right here wasn't see-through, that would just be great. But it's still nice and clean, and I don't have wires everywhere, which is nice. Alright, so only this very first one is getting set like into the ground. The rest of them are raised up, but let me just add some temporary foundations here to make this a little bit easier on myself. Alright, so now I can get it lined up correctly. Alright, as long as we get it at the right height, then I can nudge it back and forth. but it looks like we nailed it. Okay, is this... Oh, well, except for the fact that it's backwards. All right, there we go. Okay, so just give myself a little bit of space here. I filled this in, but I'm still not exactly sure how I'm going to deal with it, because if you're not using asphalt, you just run into the weird Z-fighting flipping issues. And so I pretty much always default to asphalt whenever I do this kind of a corner. So I'll have to figure that out, but we'll figure that out later. Let's show off how all this comes together. All right, might as well just throw down 2 of them since we've got the space. And then let's fill in this hole. All right, and T to get rid of all that busyness. The spacing is going to end up being the same for all of these different rows. I'm going to give myself 2 foundations. I'll be honest, I don't need that much space. I could easily cut this down by a foundation and still have plenty of space. But with the amount of machines that I'm placing, I think adding, you know, I don't know, I guess 8 or 10 more foundations in length that way doesn't really make a huge difference to me, because this is going to take up a pretty big amount of space, and I kind of like having them spaced out just a little bit. I don't need to be too cramped. And then the last one. Okay, so let's start here at the beginning, and let me show you how it all comes together. So we've got the crude oil, and this is just going to get linked up, although let's be honest, the very end one doesn't need a pipeline junction, so we're going to clean it up. Much better. Okay, so again, this will take 33.75 crude oil, and then by the end of it, it'll get turned into 120 rubber. So this pipe work is already done. I'm just going to need to connect water to that. And then from here, these ones are doing the residual rubber. So let's group these up. So like I said, just going to pick the middle point here. Actually, these are Mark II. Each machine needs 40 polymer resin, so Mark II on this belt right here. And then same thing with water. Each one of these would require either one extractor on its own, or I can put this here, and actually I'll probably end up changing these to Mark I pipes. And this can be fed by one water extractor overclocked to 200%. So that is going to split up the polymer resin, and I'll go over that in a second. And then from here, it's pretty simple. Since each one of these is going to output 20 rubber, a group of 3 of them is going to be 60. So we can just take a belt. And that's why it's at that height. I can just connect it straight into that one. Since I just said those will be outputting 60 total, each one of these needs 30. So we just split it in between those two. And then from here, let's go ahead and run these pipes back. See, we can go to out here and here. The one on the left can plug straight in. Nice and easy. So this is kind of one of the weird things I've discovered with blenders is you just can't quite get the spot that you want, right? So pipes are weird, so you may want to rotate it so you actually get it lined up, because if you don't, really hard to see. But this isn't quite parallel with the foundation. Now it is. Now that it's parallel with the foundation, I'm going to lock it in place and then use control and the arrow to nudge it just a half a meter. And now I get the nice right angle. But I actually think I need this 2 meters farther. All right, so right here to there. And now I get that nice 90-degree turn. All right, so that is going to send the fuel on over to these, into the pumps, and that will feed the 3 refineries right there. And then out here is where all the rubber will come out. And for this, I'm just going to use some lifts to bring it down to the bottom, mainly because I just think it looks cool when you just see a constant little waterfall of rubber flowing out of all the machines. And now that I have Mark 6 belts at 1200, these machines are each putting out 60. I can group 20 of them together and completely fill up a Mark 6 belt. So we'll be able to keep this pretty well organized. Alright, so as you can see, this is a really scalable system. Like I said, those refineries are inputting 33.75. So a group of 4 of them, or 2 of these blueprints, would be 135. Which oddly enough is the number that I pretty much always go with, or multiples of this number when working with crude oil and the fuel. You just get really round, even numbers. You can squeeze out that extra 15, you know, if this was an impure node. But you're going to do a lot more work for that extra bit. And for me, I just don't think it's worth it. Instead, I'll just use more crude oil. But like I said, this is really scalable. So this you could run off of an impure node, and it would create 240 rubber. You could double it for a normal node, and you get 480. And then with the pure node, you'll get 960. So that's what this row is going to be, is this is going to be a pure node, and then I'm going to add a second row, and that's going to be a pure node. And then I'm going to add a third row, and that's going to use the 2 normal nodes. And that's going to use all of the oil, except for that guy right there. Please tell me in the comments that I'm not crazy. This didn't exist pre 1.0, because I could have sworn the only oil out here was the 2 pure and the 2 normal. When I came over here and I saw that, I was really confused. I'm sure if it is new that they talked about it in the video of the additions that they're adding for 1.0, but I completely forgot. And it was kind of a cool, pleasant surprise that 750 bonus oil out here. But for now, I'm not going to use it. Well, let me get to work and place a few hundred refineries. And just like that, all the machines are in place. Well, minus the water extractors, but we'll get to that later. Alright, so I already did the belt and pipe work for the very first section. So with the crude oil, really simple. Everything is getting fed off of the one line. And for now, I powered on a couple rows of machines just so I can fly around. But I'm going to turn these off and pre-fill the pipes. And I'm actually going to end up letting these completely back up. So the fact that they're all manifolded won't be an issue. Because normally, I don't like trying to split this many machines off of one pipe. But letting the system back up should take care of all that. And I didn't need to do anything there. We've just got the straight pipes running across there. And then, like I mentioned, I went with the Mark 1 pipes instead. And then those are just being sent below. And I have all of the machines grouped up. So this is the polymer resin being load balanced. So just added another splitter and then group those 2 up. And then you go up another level and bring up this half. And then under here is where I'm going to add basically a storage container. So just as an example, I'm just going to throw this down here. All right, so in this row, there are 24 refineries. Each refinery needs 40 polymer resin. I need 960 polymer resin. These are only spitting out 22.5. And there's 16 of them in this row. So that's only 360. Meaning I need another 600 polymer resin. And that is where the train comes in. So for these first 2 rows, I have enough polymer resin to offset the difference. Alright, so to get the spacing right, let's just go ahead and put that there. And I'm going to need a splitter, so let's go ahead and just put that right there. And an industrial storage container. Just want enough space to be able to see that belt, and delete this so we can actually connect it to the splitter. So this needs to be Mark 6, since I need 960 on there. Means this is going to have to be Mark 6, right? For now, I'm not going to put it there because I don't want this next section to start. And that's how I delay everything from getting completely started. If I don't have this belt here, no resin is going to make it to here, meaning that nothing else can be made, and it'll let all of the liquids back up. But I will need to plug a Mark 6 belt into there to get everything going. So I'll have 1200, but I need 960, so I need to siphon off 240. Which is pretty easy. We just add a merger back here. And then 2 Mark 2 belts, because that would be 120. This is 120. So now we just need a Mark 3. And that'll feed into there. And then this line up here is collecting all of that polymer resin from all of the refineries. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come to the end. I think it's going this way. Yeah. And then we can go ahead and just run this along the roof. All right, so this is the 360 coming from all those refineries. Go ahead and lift this up to right there. And this can plug straight into there. Now there's going to be a lot more concrete and platforms down here. But we'll have the 600 line from the train station plug in right here. So if we're going to plug that into here, we actually need to upgrade this to Mark 6. There we go. And that's how we're going to deal with the polymer resin. All right, so move on to the next step. And right here is real simple. We just ran pipes and the belt just straight across. Everything else is already done in the blueprint. And then the final step. Like I mentioned, if I group 20 machines, I can put them all on one Mark 6 belt. So since there's 32 in a row, the first 20 get belted up, and then the next 12 get grouped together right here. And then what I'm going to do is then the first 8 of the next row is going to be on one belt, and that's going to come over here. And then I think I'm actually going to delete this. Wouldn't be a problem. Rarely ever put them right next to each other, but wouldn't be an issue. So there's that bit, and then the other bit I think will probably only be Mark 4. Yeah, I think it'll be exactly a Mark 4. Will come from the next row. And then I'll have 2 of my final belts right here. So now I just need to lay down the rest of the pipes and the belts to get all of these connected, and I'll move on to the next step. Most of the belt and pipe work is done up here. Now we get to go underneath. So like I said, I'm just going to add a whole bunch more concrete so I have a little bit more area to work with. And this is where the polymer resin is happening. And then the 600 from the train station, it'll just get plugged in over there. And then I'll go through how I'm doing the last one, because that one's going to work a little bit different since I don't have that expert polymer resin. But I actually don't like the way that I have it set up now. So I'm going to go over the new way in a little bit. Alright, so I think I'm just going to bring this down so that it's not just a floating ledge. And I'll probably just do that all the way around. For now, I'm just going to work with down here. And so, let's see. Yeah, I don't want to like at the water level because I really don't like when the water comes up over the foundation. So I think we'll just work with this. So let's go ahead and run that along there. And just to give myself a reference on this side. Alright, so what I'm doing is getting ready for the water. So let's go ahead and change our pipes. Blue. Change the horizontal to vertical. And let's go ahead and bring it right to the edge. And 8. Alright, so I need 8 pipes. They can all be Mark 1. Each one needs to be 180 water. This is the first step, making the fuel. So I'm just going to run these back until I find, let's see, there it is. So we go back 2. And then go from here to here. Yep, just like that. And we're just going to keep doing that all the way back, basically. And that's how I'll feed all of the machines. But for the actual water extractors, so the pipes will take up that row, and I don't like that it's just hanging over, so we're going to put a half foundation and put that there. Alright, so that means the pipe should be able to come to the halfway mark. Yeah. If you want that S bend, it'll take 4 meters, so half a foundation. And because pipes are really weird when there's an open section, really hard to place them right next to each other, easiest way is just to place all these first. And then just connect the pipes. Alright, so I'm going to give myself one more foundation here. And because I know I'm going to need a pump, and it's probably going to need to be Mark II. So let's go ahead and set that right in the middle of this foundation. Grab my water extractor, and I don't know why the game does this. It just why? And because you can't nudge these, it's really kind of a pain. And the only way, because I am holding control and it says it's lined up, but it's not. And even if I change this to a pipeline junction, it's going to do the same thing where it says it's aligned, but it's very clearly a meter off. And it's not even exactly a meter. It's like a really weird distance. So easiest way to deal with this is just to quickly save the game and reload it. So be right back. And we're back. Let's see if that works. Hot diggity. Okay, so it's actually a little too close. So let's go out to like here. Yeah, looks good. Thankfully nothing's gonna go right behind it, so it doesn't really matter. We can go back and switch to our pump. It'll be that way. Alright, so now I need 8 extractors for those 8 pipes. Alright, gotta get them blue. And there we go. So, and then now we just put a pump in front of each one of these. And then we just pair it up with the pipe. So nice and easy, just gotta go through and do it for all of those. So that's how I'm gonna do the water for each of these, and I'm sure you all know by now, but in case you didn't, this was always one of my biggest pet peeves for the game, was water extractors more than any of the other extraction devices. Now I can finally control and paste, even with the power shard. Ah, so beautiful. Alright, so that does the water for that section. But then there's the second bit, and this one is going to need a Mark II pipe. Go back to horizontal to vertical. And we'll do a similar thing, but we're going to go this way, and there's only 4 of them. Each of these ones need 240 water. But I'm just going to do basically the exact same thing. Come to here, go back 2, and there we go. And then, well, for the other 2, I'll probably just run those on the ceiling just to get over that little mound. So we need this one and that one for the pipes. And then if I do that for the pumps, 2.5 is still enough for these, thankfully. So go ahead and place a pump in the same spot. Middle of the foundation. Grab this. Satisfactory, why? Why do you do this to me? I've had it where I've placed just so many of these and none of them had an issue. And now as soon as I go to place a second row, I get this issue for a second time? That's so weird. I really don't have this issue that much, but wow. Well, instead of reloading the game again, I think you get the picture. So the pipes are just going to get grouped up like this. And there will be 4 machines, and they will be overclocked to 240. Alright, and then I just need to copy this exact thing one more time for the second row that's using the pure node. These 2 first rows are identical. The third row is the one that gets a little bit different. The first section of water extractors will be exactly the same, but since I don't have all of that extra polymer resin, this second row is going to be a little bit smaller. Let's just skip ahead to where I can turn these on. And there they are. And they're all even in the right spots. Nice and lined up. I don't know why I was having those issues. So strange. I went with the big frame pillars to run the power. I actually really like it. It's a convenient spot to be able to line up for both the pump and each water extractor, and then just kind of run them along there, and it keeps it nice and organized. Now that they're all in place, I am going to just connect this wire right here. And I'm going to go ahead and let these run for a little bit. Oh, well. Guess these are a great spot if you remember to connect the water extractor. There we go. Okay. Looks like I forgot to overclock these ones. I'm going to let these just stay on for a little while I work on some other things. And by the time I'm finished, these will all be backed up. And then I can cut off power to everything up here. And I'll create a priority power switch I'll get the oil extractors turned on so that I can back up all of the pipes with that, and then it'll be set to turn on. While the water is backing up, I've got a couple things to do. So I need to create a bus, and I'm gonna have this right here be for the belts, and that'll bring the polymer resin over here and the finished product, the rubber, out that way. And then I'll use the underneath side to bring in the crude oil. So I need to create those extractors, and then I'll pipe them underneath here and bring them into the factory. So I'm gonna work on building those, and then that is the last major part. But as far as decorating goes, I'm only gonna do a little bit. And that's because this is going to turn into not necessarily a mega factory, but a fairly large factory. And I just don't want to lock myself into a set size. So instead of designing the whole thing and then having to delete a bunch later because it's not big enough, I know that will be the case, I'm just going to decorate one side of it. So sorry, it won't be as pretty as my last factories that, were just all in one. But hopefully eventually this will be a large factory that I can be proud of. So I'm going to get to work on these last parts, and then we can take the final tour, and I can finally tell you exactly how I'm going to deal with this last section. And then we'll watch it come to life. Fixit has expanded to the West Coast. So like I said, it's got a wall and nothing else really. It's like those old Western Hollywood kind of things where it's just like a big cardboard thing of the storefront. Was it like Blazing Saddles, I think, has that? Yeah, so that's what we got. Just one wall, but hey, it's a decent looking wall. I'm pretty happy with it. It's made out of 2 different blueprints. So this is the lower section. So I wanted it to have some nice depth and make it look like it's nice and supported. So just used a lot of the ramps and just then the normal foundations underneath. And I really like the contrast between the coated concrete and then just the matte kind of finish of the asphalt. And then just use some more pillars and some 1 meter signs down the middle. And some ramps and try to offset things by a little bit just to help give it that extra depth. And then this right here is made so that it'll just stick right on the end of the existing foundations that are there. And then there's another blueprint that goes on top of it. So pretty simple. I'm just using more of the half foundations for the asphalt so I can get that kind of finish on the outside. And then more of the coated concrete and the beams and some signs and more windows. And then on the inside, I'm just going to use the glass frame foundations as a walkway. Alright, so let's work our way over to the factory. Start with the train station. So when I'm ready, I'm just going to delete the sink. And then I'm just going to plug up each of those lines, and we'll get 600 polymer resin headed into the factory. Here are the final sinks, and I just decided to just put smart splitters in there because I'm going to do the same thing I did with those other factories with the polymer resin. If anything happens to my train schedule, or I don't know, I screw something up, because inevitably it's going to be my fault. This way, having the smart splitter will allow things to start going to the sink if my train station ever gets backed up for some reason. So just went ahead and put those in right away. These are going to be 4 completely full 1200 lines of rubber. We've just got the belt bus here, so the rubber is coming this way, the polymer resin is headed out that way. Head back upstairs, and we've got our oil extractors. The pier nodes are overclocked to 540. And then same setup I've used for all of my other ones. I've just got a pump here, and then we're just using the quote-unquote water tower. No, this is oil. And as long as I'm not trying to go above this height, I have the head lift to go wherever I want. And then those are just plugging in, and they're going to this bottom section. And then we've got another one right there, and then the last one is coming from over here. Alright, so here is the front of it. And I did add myself a little hyper tube to be able to get back and forth nice and quickly. Just use some signs, and if you want them to be extra shiny like this, just make sure that you turn on the glossy. I think matte is the default, and I almost always forget to even look at this because you have to scroll down and I forget. And I wanted the entrance to be kind of a nice open big area where I could put a couple of the hyper tubes. This one is supposed to be an entrance. Guess I forgot to put that part in. But this will take you downstairs to the logistics area and we can get to the water extractors and whatnot. And like with most of my factories, out of habit, I just put in a light control panel, even though I so rarely use lights. But who knows? Maybe this will be the one. And when we're ready, we'll flip that switch. Let's take a tour of everything else. Alright, so I did make one change from how I originally designed it, and I don't know if I actually even talked about it. So this is a Mark 1 lift. And then this, instead of being a Mark 1 belt, made it a Mark 2. And it just gives it that extra little bit of wiggle room to merge all 20 of these onto one line. It was just kind of having some weird issues, it seemed like, because I've already tested this. And I would just get a gap on it every once in a while, and I think it was having an issue merging, but changing it to be just the one speed faster seemed to clear that up for the most part. I'll get to that later though. And I also noticed that having two Mark 6 belts, even though I didn't actually need these two to be Mark 6, I think this one could have been a Mark 5 and this one could have been like a Mark 4. And they were going to merge up to create the 1200, but having them both be Mark 6 seems to work out just a little bit better. But again, I think there may be another underlying issue, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Finally, time to go over the last row. So quite a few less refineries for the residual rubber section because I don't have that extra polymer resin. So I'm only working with that 360 that all of these heavy oil residue are making. So how do we go around that? Well, for the other rows, they just directly feed from this set over to the next set. But this one, it's got to be a little bit different. So I am merging all of the rubber together and it's going down below. And then as you can see on this side, I've got two inputs. Even though this could easily all fit on one belt, there's a reason why it's on two. But before we get there, let me show you the very back end. So these are basically split in half. This amount is going and getting grouped up to create another full 1200 belt over there. And this bit is actually the part that isn't going to the train station. So I'm grouping everything together, but it's going the opposite direction, and then we're going underneath. So it's just gonna run along the ceiling, then drop down here, over to our belt balancing section here. That total row of refineries was 32, and it is split in half, so that was 16, and they output 60 each. So this belt right here is 960 rubber. If I split it in half, which is what I'm doing right here with this splitter, that's 480. Pretty handy. So I've got 480 and 480. If I take 480 and I try to split it three ways, it's going to try to put 160 on each one, right? But if I have less than that, this should be completely full. So I've got 120 here and I've got 60 here, leaving me with 300. So that 300 is then getting grouped into this right here. If we just come up here real quick. So there are 9 refineries doing the residual rubber. Each of those are outputting 20 rubber. So that is 180 that is on this belt right here. Merging up with the 300 that we just split off. So here is our 480. And that is going to come into a smart splitter. I've got the left and the center as any overflow to the right. And the reason being that is I want half of this to be prioritized over the other half. So I'm just doing my split belt speed trick. Definitely can't say that very quickly. Using a Mark III will ensure that this belt is full, but it's going to get limited down to 120. So I'm doing that on both sides. So that means this should be getting 240. And if we head upstairs, show you the reasoning behind that. Let me try to explain the method to all of this madness. If I wasn't using the smart splitter, I would still be doing essentially everything else the same. I would need to split off 300 to make this whole section run at 100% because I'm not making enough in this step like I am for the other two rows. Without the smart splitter, I would just be using one lift that would go up into a splitter and then everything else would look the same. The difference is because this is only creating, I think like a quarter of what I need, If I was going to feed all of these machines at the same time, then they would only run at a 0.25% efficiency until I started getting some from that half to loop back. So using the smart splitter, I can prioritize this half of the machines over this half, because really I just don't want to start feeding these ones until this is at 100%. Once this is at 100%, then the smart splitter overflow will kick in and the other 240 will fill this line. If you didn't do the smart splitter, it would eventually probably get up to full speed. And I say probably because you are kind of at a race against time. So the way I have this set up is, if we come down here, the polymer resin is all getting grouped up, coming along the roof, headed into this storage container, right? And then I just don't have this belt, and then that way those machines won't get started yet, and I can kind of stockpile it in here, let all the fluids back up. So when I go to start this up, I'll have a nice little stockpile of polymer resin, and that's why I load balanced it, but I only need to send back a Mark II belt, so it makes it nice and easy. But I'll only have so much polymer resin, because eventually those machines will shut off and they won't create anymore. And they'll only create more polymer resin once I start using the fuel. So as you can probably see the issue then, if these machines aren't running, then they're not consuming fuel. If we're not consuming fuel, we're not consuming the heavy oil residue. And if we're not consuming that, that means we're not creating any polymer resin. So with this setup, you're in a race against time. You want to get this up to 100% pretty much as quickly as possible, or else you won't be creating enough polymer resin, and then it just becomes kind of a hard loop to solve. Now you could go through the machines and just manually place in stacks of the material, but I don't want to do that for this sort of a thing. Using the smart splitter trick is all I need. Forgot to mention, the extra 660 rubber from the final step that's getting split off is just going to its own sink down here. And the reason for that is not all of it, but some of that is going to be staying in this factory for the next part. Having 4 full Mark VI belts headed to the train station gives me 4,800 to ship wherever I want though. Alright, so the one last thing I didn't really mention was this is kind of my preference to deal with 2 normal nodes. Instead of joining them into one Mark II pipe, I personally just prefer to leave them as separate pipes, and then I have to split them less times when they get up here. Each pipe is only being split like 8 times instead of one pipe being split 16 times. Don't ask me why, I've just had good luck doing this. And that completes the tour. It's that time. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to do this in stages. I'm going to take this hyper tube, we're going to flip the switch. That'll get the heavy oil residue and the fuel going. And then all the polymer resin is getting stored in those industrial storage containers. Then once all the fluids are backed up, we'll connect the belts, and then everything else will spring to life. So let's get it going. There we go. Last yellow lights we were looking for. So we should be able to fly across and see all of the heavy oil residue backed up about the same time, since the pipes were pre-filled. And let's see the last one. Yep, all yellow. Alright. So let's go ahead and just check the oil. Make sure the extractors are backed up too. Alright, so this one is backed up. Let's check on the other ones real quick. Good. Alright, and this one is backed up too. Perfect. Okay, so now we can really get this thing started. First, I'm going to head over here. We need to get this sent into the factory. But like I mentioned before, I want to make sure there's at least a little bit of a buffer built up, so I'm just going to let these sit for just a second. That one wasn't straight. Alright, let's go ahead and plug these up. Since this far one is the one that requires part of it to loop back, I can get this one started first. So I can double check, yep, Mark 4 is what I need for this one. And there it goes. And then Mark 6 for both of these. Oh, it's a beautiful sight. Alright, let's take a look at the last one. There we go. Looks like they're finally all staying on. If you have enough polymer resin, you can get those ones to start up and stay on really quickly. If you're relying on some of the finished product to loop back, it takes a little bit longer, but still pretty quick. Ah, what a beautiful sight. I mentioned earlier in the video that I changed all of these to be Mark II belts, because I felt like that just had an easier time dealing with this. And the reason is I would just get a random gap every once in a while. But if I checked all the machines, they were all at 100%. So I think I figured out what the issue is. Unfortunately, I think it's my PC. Now, normally I would say that's a bit of a cop-out answer, just I'll blame my old hardware as to why I can't quite figure out how to get this perfect. But I think I know why now. The belts will be fine, and I'm not seeing any gaps, haven't seen any gaps in a while. But if I hit escape, and I pull up this, and if I try to either load or save the game, the game stutters there for a second, right? And then in not too long, there's a gap. And if I just stay on this menu here, there's another gap. But if I go back, it'll clear itself out and there won't be any more gaps. And I can just sit here and it'll just stay fine. But once I open up the menu to save the game, all of a sudden, I don't know what happens. It just doesn't merge right for some reason. I'm not sure. So let me know, have any of you ran into that? Is there any sort of a workaround besides me just spending the money and upgrading my PC? And if you have suggestions for that, by all means, let me know. I haven't looked at parts in quite a while. And if I'm not mistaken, a better GPU would obviously help, but I think more of it is CPU bound. So that and some more RAM is probably what I really need. And there's 4,800 rubber being sunk. And there's still that 660 still inside the factory that's being sunk as well, for a grand total of 5,460 rubber. Over 5,000 rubber. That is mission complete. So thankfully, I shouldn't have to make any more rubber in this playthrough. I will need to make more plastic, but not nearly in the same quantity. And I'll be able to reuse a lot of these blueprints. I'll just change them ever so slightly. But that's actually not going to be the next project. For the next one, I'm going to be staying right out here on the west coast, adding on to this factory. And I'm going to be making heavy modular frames and fused modular frames. Enough for the rest of the playthrough. So look forward to that. And thanks for watching.